Hi, I'm Ann Marshall, and I'm here today with Sandra Orndorf. And this is a conversation about art, archetypes, and ancient wisdom. And today, I think Sandra is really bringing in the archetypal language and influences, as well as very much the ancient wisdoms of healing and et cetera. And I think that's pretty evident by your background, Sandra, having or being a certified Enneagram coach and embodiment coach. You're also a teacher of Enneagram, a life coach, and certified yoga instructor. You just got back from Egypt. So I really see that there's a lot that you can offer to people in many aspects. Is there something you'd like to add to that?
I think the only thing that I would add to that is I love the part about the ancient wisdom, and what has become a new love is sacred geometry, and that is something that I'm seeing over and over again in embodiment work, which showed up for me first in leading meditations. For 2 years, I led meditation every day on an app called Clubhouse, and sacred geometry just started showing up for me. So it shows up in the body in yoga, it shows up in meditation, and it definitely showed up on my trip to Egypt. So there's a lot of sacred wisdom that's coming through, and I love that part of it.
Mm. And it's always impressive when synchronicity happens and it adds meaning and relevance and passion, I think, to the whole experience.
Absolutely.
So I don't even know where to begin with you because there's so much content. I wanted to go straight to Egypt since we've mentioned it. I don't know if that's a good place to begin or if you want to start with the Enneagrams.
Actually, we can weave both in because they
Okay.
are relevant to each other. I actually went to Egypt for something. There's a teacher, Russ Hudson, and he is probably not now like as much out in the forefront. He's just kind of not that kind of teacher, but he's so full of wisdom and in-depth knowledge. He's one of the first. I thought I was looking because I thought I had the book here. He and Russ Hudson and Don Riso were one of the first resources. I think that book might be 30 years old. And he loves Egypt, and he's actually drawn the connection of the Enneagram to Egypt, and he's a studier of the work of Gurdjieff. So Gurdjieff, and actually he introduced me to some of the work, the movement work of Gurdjieff at that conference that I went to in Egypt. So just give you a little history about and I'm going to have to pull up some of my resources because I don't have all of this off the top of my head. So Gurdjieff actually is if we trace the Enneagram back, even though you'll hear that it is a tool of ancient wisdom, the ancient wisdom part of it is actually the sacred geometry. So the ancient wisdom is actually there you go, the circle, the triad, and what we call the hexad. So that's the part of the ancient wisdom that's part of it. The Gurdjieff, what he did is his work recognized that there are three basic parts of all of us. There's the mental, there's the mental, which is the mind, the emotional, which is the heart, the feeling, and the body. And what he did is he said, and by recognizing is that the heart, the head and the heart have there's a lower mind, a higher mind, a lower heart, and a higher heart. And actually in chakras, when I first started learning chakras, I didn't realize there's a lower heart and a higher heart. So in chakra language, energy language, which I'm an energy practitioner, your higher heart is here. Your lower heart and chakra is here, what most people think of their chakra. But as we become unconditional in our heart, this is actually the higher heart. This is where the chakra of the higher heart comes. This is often why people feel like they're getting constriction in the throat, because there's pressure in the heart when we become conditional. When this conditional heart starts getting blocked, we often get a lot of blockages up in the throat. And there's also the higher mind and the lower mind. And the lower mind is this place right behind on the left-hand side. It's this reptilian. So there's a reptilian brain here that controls your autonomic. It's your breathing. It's the things you don't even think about. But there's a conditional mind and there's an unconditional mind. So he recognized that. And now science is backing all this up. All right. Now we have all this research and all this science, the heart math. I mean, that's what the heart math is. Joe Dispenza is talking, he's leading people into the pineal so we can get to this unconditional. So we have a lot of work now that he was coming out with in the 1900s. So his work is more like 1915. He also recognized that something that he called the fourth way.
Is this Gurdjieff?
Yep.
Okay.
And he called it the work, and it's the fourth way. So how do we get to this fourth way? How do we get to this center? So he was one of the first people that started to say, there's a natural imbalance that we come into. Like, we don't get balance between the head, the heart, and the gut. And he's recognized that there was an unbalance that we have, and that this fourth way is to come to center. Now we call this now presence. That's what presence is coming to center. And from a sacred geometry, coming to presence means, there we go. We come to center. So we literally, all these points are pointing to the middle. That's coming to center. Technically, but also metaphorically, if we think about it. So he started, his work was to go through movements, actually. And that's one of the things I learned that I hadn't done, is actually you do these movements and you move as an individual, but you get in a group and you start doing these movements. It's kind of strange, actually, but it actually helps bring in this collective presence to yourself and to others by sort of having to let go and let presence come in. And then what happens is there's something magical that happens, like when we individually come into presence and we start letting go of our head and we start letting go all this, the group starts to do that too. Then what happened is Echazo came in. He's from Chile, and he started bringing in sort of like the structure around the Enneagram, and then psychologists started recognizing. So they started noticing that people constricted in different ways when they, quote, came off the mountain. And so that's where this idea is, that there's 9 points on the circle. There's 9 personality types. Now, going back to this, what now we call centers of intelligence. So and we know this from research. We know that there's not just brain in the brain. There's brain cells that live in the head, that live in the heart, and live in the gut. And so that research now, the scientific research, is pointing back to what they were saying, is there's centers of intelligence. There's intelligence in the heart. There's intelligence in the head, and there's intelligence in the gut. But we come in with an innate configuration of that. So 3 of the numbers are oriented toward the head, 3 are oriented toward the heart, and 3 are oriented toward the gut. And in balance, in coming to center, we're using all of them. They all come together as a collective. Now, we know this when we come into meditation. When we get to that sense of oneness inside, we don't have a fractured mind. We don't have a fractured, heart, and we kind of come into presence with our body. That's unification. So we have all, hopefully, experienced glances of that. But can we live from that place? And so this is a way to, one, it's come it's become kind of superficial. I mean, really, like the people who started it and taught it, it was an oral tradition. Only until 15 years ago did it come out into the public the way it is, because before that it was considered an oral tradition. Like you would never tell somebody your number, because it wasn't, they what they identified is this could become very egoic. And the whole reason why you're doing this is to relax the ego and come into this higher self. So when I egoically say I'm a 7, my ego is saying that to a certain extent.
So each of those numbers on that circle, or those points, is a number. So
Yes.
that's where you get the numbers from. So there'd be a total of 9 numbers.
Yep. There's 9 numbers. Now this particular chart, you can't see the numbers very well, but at the top of the chart is the 9. So 9 signifies completeness. And then we go around the chart this way. So it's I know we're probably backwards, but this is going around like a clock. So it starts with 1, the perfectionist, 2, the helper, 3, the performer, 4, the individualist, 5, the investigator, 6, the loyalist, 7, the enthusiast, 8, the protector, and 9, the peacemaker. And if in utopia, when we came in as children, both centers of intelligence would be like a tripod and they would be balanced. But what happens is, as we have life, something happens and we go, ouch, and we pick one of them up. And when we pick one of them up, that's what we call repressed. So now that center of intelligence is repressed. That means one of them takes dominant. So it's like standing one says, okay, I'll take over. One says, I'll be a supporter. And this one is off. It's off the tripod. It's now not balanced. So one becomes your dominant, one becomes your supporter, one becomes repressed. So in each of the numbers have a different configuration. Now, why does this matter? Well, it shows you why the 9 are different energetically. And from my work, working with chakras, working with energy, there's an energetic template that goes along with each of the numbers.
An energetic template. That sounds very intriguing. And how does one determine what their number is? How is that information obtained?
2 different ways. One, you go on a discovery of self-exploration, right? There's a lot of literature out there that you can read about the numbers, and sometimes just reading about it, highlighting what is resonating, you start to go, some people can look at it and go, oh my God, that's me. And they'll go, I'm a this. Sometimes it's like a process of elimination. Or now what's becoming more common is people are taking tests. Now, here's the thing about a test. A test is only as good as you are self-aware. So 50% of the population are taking tests and they're getting wrong. They're identifying incorrectly. Is that bad? Maybe not, because this is a journey. Maybe if they keep on the journey, they'll realize, you know what, my ego didn't want me to allow me to be. There are some numbers that, like, one number can't make a decision. So they'll be all over the place. As soon as they're like, I don't know, I can't decide. I feel like I'm this, I feel like I'm that. Like, all of us feel that way to a certain extent. But if they start really elaborating and, time after time, I'm like, you're 6, because they're repressed in their head. That's their repression is in their head. So they're in the head triad, meaning they take information dominantly through their head, but they're actually repressed. So they're the personality that will look for a lot of data and then they're almost like they can't use the data. So their real motivation, and this is the Enneagram is based on motivation. What is the motivation? They all have different motivations for safety and security. The motivation of a loyalist is to be supported. And the way in which they get supported is actually by, what's your opinion? 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 And it's as if you know, everybody's going to have a different opinion. So what happens when I get all these different opinions? I'm back to square one, is I can't make a decision. That's a subtle way of seeing that your motivation is actually your experience. Most people aren't recognizing that they're unconscious behavior. So they know they're in this repeating loop, but they really like what's underneath it. So there's an underneath it for each of the numbers. Or you can do what I do as an Enneagram coach, is I can help the person by using my intuitive skills. Sometimes that's the thing. It's like I kind of will get a hit on what the person is, but I usually have to wait. It's not for me to know what that person's number is. It's their exploration, and I help and guide and see there's a nuance. So there's numbers that get mistyped. So the performer, a lot of people in America is really a performer country, where actually Canada is more of a peacemaker. So in this country, we value performance and achievement. So sometimes, they'll think, well, I'm goal oriented, I must be a 3, the performer. Well, anybody can be goal oriented. What's your motivation? So you just, it's coming back. It's like taking the mirror, shining a light on it and saying, does this resonate? The thing that I think that one of the things I want people to know about the Enneagram is that most people don't talk about it this way, but it really is a system of energy, because it recognizes 3 are assertive, 3 are withdrawn, and 3 are dependent. So how is your energy moving to get what you need and what you want? So 3 are going to step in, and our language says that. Step into your role, take a step back, come alongside. Like, we have language that actually speaks to the energetics of it.
That's really fascinating. And not to complicate things, but I also know that you overface or interface maybe the archetype and understanding of archetype as well. How and maybe even for the sake of our listeners here, people who aren't familiar with archetype, how would you describe that, and how do they play together?
Great question. So archetype. So, here's the thing about an archetype. The Enneagram is an archetypal system. It is an archetype. In meaning, like, when you say peacemaker, we kind of know what that means. She's a peacemaker. He's a peacemaker. If I say she's a performer, we know what that means. So an archetype is really about a pattern of behavior. And these are patterns of behavior. They are sometimes, they're a little bit, that's what I was saying. It's an archetypal behavior, and if you're sensitive to energy, there's an energetic that's associated. And let me explain. So if you're in the body, so peacemakers, they are in the body triad. What peacemakers do for others is they are solid. They're grounded to the earth. When we interact, when we come into connection with the peacemaker, we feel their groundedness. We recognize that groundedness because we also recognize, and I'll just use myself as an enthusiast, that you may not feel my energy is grounded. You may feel it a little top heavy because I'm in the head triad. You may feel a lot of like, ooh, ooh, especially if I am ungrounded. Not that I can't be grounded. When I'm in presence with my clients, I'm very grounded. When I go out and I'm just Sandra in my daily life, especially if I have stress, I can be a top that's spinning. I can get really assertive. My voice will get, my pattern of speech will get really ramped up. I will overwhelm the, you know what, out of someone who is a withdrawn, who's like, whoa, you're too much for me. So we understand this even when we don't understand it. Those are patterns of behavior. And that's what archetypal consultants, you do as well. They are also patterns of behavior. The way I see it, and I might be the only one that's doing work with both of these systems, is that the Enneagram is like the macro, and the archetypes that we're working with sacred contracts are getting into the finer level of detail. So in other words, like your survivors, your child, your victim, your saboteur, your prostitute, every one of the 9 numbers in the Enneagram all have those. They still all have those. So when they're victim, and that's the thing, is the difference between, like, if you're in business, I was in business, I was a management consultant. We were always doing Myers-Briggs. I never resonated with Myers-Briggs. I could never remember it. I love personality systems, and I could not resonate with it because it's static. To me, it was static. The hexad in here is recognizing that we don't stay, our energy doesn't stay in one place. So our energy is always moving. So when you're, let's say, a helper, when you go to stress, you go to the challenger. When you go to growth, you go to the individualist. So your built-in energetics, and because we do all have all types, we have all access. What Gurdjieff knew is that there is a way in which coming to presence moves, because this one is the law of one. We are all one. What is in one is in the whole. What's in the whole is in the one. We are fractals of the divine. There is a holy idea associated with each number. Holy perfection, the perfectionist who needs things to be right and good. The holy idea, the way they can attain presence is that it is all good. It is all perfect. Even imperfection is perfection. That's the holy idea of the perfectionist. So Gurdjieff, with his body movements, knew that we're going to travel through all of them. And that is what is very different about this system than your static personalities, because it assists you understanding how your energy moves within you, moves between you and another, and your pattern of growth, and how to recognize that. It's a system of consciousness, just like the individual archetypes are bringing us into consciousness.
Yeah, I can get that. It seems like the personality tests are more like stamps of identity, and they don't seem to have as much fluidity as you're describing with the Enneagram because of the dynamism, the flow between, and the same thing with the archetypal system, that there is kind of a navigation through the, through those influences. What's involved in the Enneagram counseling? And what does that look like?
Mm. So one of the first things, like if I have a client, sometimes people come to me just for the Enneagram. Sometimes they're coming for other reasons. I personally, this is one of the things that I love about the Enneagram, is that your purpose is attached to your personality. I see it over and over again. So I am a 7 whose motivation is to avoid being trapped in pain. To be trapped, and especially in pain, is the fear. And so the personality will do anything it can to get out of that. That's why the 7, the passion of the 7 is gluttony. And it's really about diversion. In other words, like, can I escape? Let me escape from through experiences. So with my Enneagram type, and my personality and my own life experiences, I often have clients who feel pain, a lot of pain, and they're looking to transform. Like, they feel stuck in, they feel trapped. So there's usually an association with pain in some ways with my clients. Often addiction as well, like family members, addiction, maybe addiction to personality, so that constriction is happening and it's like a repeated pattern. I want to get out. So sometimes they're coming from Enneagram specifically. The thing that the Enneagram helps me in my coaching is that I then naturally understand your template. I naturally now understand your motivation. I understand there's an energy about that. When you start saying the words, if you say the word deceit to a performer, you can bring them to their knees. There's an energy about the words. And because we're archetype consultants, we know, and I'm going to use the word frequency. We know that there is a frequency to each word. It matters. The word matters. So if you say trapped, and I don't just mean in common language, I mean like you're in a session. But if trapped is said to a 7, you can see it. There's a reaction. You say deceit to a 3, there's a reaction. Those are because those are words associated to when the ego is in full. The ego is managing. The ego is saying, this is the result of me being in my unconscious behavior. So going back to archetypal talk, the performer is a natural shapeshifter. So the word deceit doesn't mean they lie. It means there's a point at which, who am I? As I continue to shapeshift, because the 3 has an unconscious need, they feel like just to be isn't good enough. There was some unconscious message that they cannot be loved for just who they are. They have to be something. Yeah. They have to transform. So what they do is it's contextual. So what does it mean to be successful? It means something different. If I'm with a bunch of crunchy granola people, success means one thing. If I'm with a bunch of executives, success means something else. So I will have to transform myself when I'm with this group, and then I transform myself with this group, and I transform myself with this group and this group, to the point where, who am I? It's self-deceit. It's really self-deceit. So that is where this is tender territory. And when, so part of the coaching is it's the template, it's releasing the energy that gets trapped in the body because of these constricted beliefs. So that's why I'm an embodiment coach. So sometimes I'm working as what you call a coach. Sometimes I'm working as a healer. Sometimes I'm always helping to get in the body. That's pretty much always going to happen through starting off the sessions with groundings. But sometimes it's moving that, like when embodiment coaches will say, when they feel a charge come up, when someone says it, like, okay, slow it down. Which part of you said that? So like when we started this conversation, you said, what archetype is here? Right? It's just getting it down to, all right, what part of your body said that? So what I do with a lot of my work is, where does the victim live in your body? Because the victim might live in your throat. For me, it might live in the belly. For some people, the victim might come up in their shoulder. So like what you're doing is you're getting into finer and finer and finer and finer granularities of healing.
This is I'm going to say, well, I was going to use the word complex. It may not be so much as complex as very holistic. It feels very encompassing. Maybe that's a better word to use. And not only to access greater awareness about oneself, but also I can see how valuable it could be in a relationship as well. So I'm kind of having a little bit of an aha about that.
Oh yeah, that's what makes it so much different than, and I see the power of the two together. Because let's just say, we're doing archetypal work and the person's really starting to get into understanding victim, and they understand the victim in themselves. And now they're starting to recognize the archetypal patterns. So they start to see victims showing up in another. And then you're like, but it's staying in the head. It's still staying a bit in the head, right? So here's the Enneagram, because again, sometimes this is language, it's sometimes behavior, it's sometimes unconscious, even the way our body moves. As an assertive, it'll literally be a step forward. Like if it's Zoom and I want to be heard and I'm pushing against others to get heard, you might even see my body come forward. Now, if we were standing near each other, I might have taken a step forward. Now, how is that perceived by the other? And that's completely unconscious. So the victim went to victimizer.
And
yeah.
And even to take that to a broader context is, not only are we looking at ourselves and how to create that firm tripod, sort of grounding, all-encompassing and whole energy, but we're also able to relate to others. I'm imagining the ripple effect that would bring to the world as well. That if we dealt more away from the ego and had a system of understanding or taking into context and respecting and addressing those different points of influence and vibration, that could only help with expansion of compassion and understanding of others, not only in the immediate surrounding, but across borders and across continents.
Yeah, I've often thought, even though it's not my specialty, I think my specialty is integration, like you've already sort of pointed out. That's what I did as a management consultant too. So it's sort of been there with me for a long time. But this is a natural system of equity and diversion. I mean, or diversity. It's built in. I mean, it's saying we are all different and we're part of the whole. And when we impact each other when we're unconscious. So the three levels of consciousness that I will speak apply to the Enneagram, but it applies in general, but is the first level of awareness with the Enneagram is understanding yourself. Okay. The second level of awareness is understanding others. And the third level of awareness is understanding how others will perceive themselves in the presence of me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's huge. So what, like I said, when my unconscious behavior of becoming assertive, how is that perceived by the other? And one of my teachers, this is an extreme example, but she said something offhanded to her husband. She's a 7, which is an assertive type. And unbeknownst to her, the perception that her husband had of himself is he almost tried to commit suicide. Now that's extreme.
Mm-hmm.
But I had a client that their daughter was not, the session was about, we have a daughter coming home from a rehabilitation. And it was, how are we going to behave? And they were sort of putting boundaries on, we're going to ask this, we're not going to ask this. And mom's really intuitive. And I said, Mom, what number do you think she is? And she gave the number. And I sort of went into my intuitive, did some things, and the number was 6, the loyalist. And they have a need to know, because they live in a lot of anxiety. And so if you like clamping down and saying you're not going to talk about a topic to a 6 would lead to a lot of anxiety. So they were legitimately trying to help the situation. But when we come from the lens of the way the others see the world, we know what they need. It's not what we think. That's the benefit. You get the lens that they're coming from.
It's always said, what sticks out in my mind is, don't give the gift that I want to get, give the gift that that person wants to receive.
Exactly what it is. It's give the gift that they want to receive, that they not only that they want, but sometimes that they desperately need.
Well, I can tell that you live and breathe this system and that you know it intimately inside and out. And it's just like oozing out of your pores. It's really remarkable to me, who's a complete novice in the subject, and so appreciate the opportunity to just barely skim the top of this big subject. And as we start to bring things to a close, I want to let readers know that we'll put a link to that chart underneath the video here, so that you'll have access to that. And of course, how to reach Sandra as well. And what I'd like to close with, because I'm into the big questions, is what do you want the world to know?
I love that question. The biggest thing I would want people to know is that the part of them that they, and I'll put we, because I'm part of that we reject is also the part of us that's our biggest gift. And it's just a reframing that I love showing people the paradoxical shift. That part of us, that part of our personality that creates so much angst in our life, is also the same part of us that is why we're here. It is our purpose, is our highest purpose. And that we all come in with this very divine nature. Like each number is a representation of the divine, and that is always there. It's always there. Even if we haven't accessed it, it's always there. So it sounds so trite, but your weakness is your gift. And it absolutely is. I see it over and over. And it usually is playing out in their life and they just haven't acknowledged it. So it's just shine a light sometimes, and you can find that part of you that you're taking for granted. Other people aren't taking that for granted.
Mm, mm. Shine the light in those dark corners, and the gift shall be received. That's really beautiful. Sandra, is there anything else you want to add as we bring things to a final close?
All I'm going to add is I love your quilt behind you. I wish I could see that and touch it. It just looks so beautiful.
We got the world in the middle there.
That's so awesome. Well, that's perfect for the Enneagram. Like you've got an Enneagram right behind you. I love it. The world is the Enneagram.
That's a perfect way to close. Thank you so much. And you've really kind of exploded my mind, and I'm grateful for that gift. Thank you.
You're welcome.